Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Sorry about the delay. We had some technical problems, so we had to restart the whole thing all over again. The issue here is the referendum, which if us will allow ZANU-PF to amend the constitution to allow Mnangagwa to stay in power beyond 2028. Tendai Biti, one of the opposition leading leaders, is explaining the process of getting there. Let's just listen to the video clip of his explanation and then we'll comment on it.
So you are being a constitutional lawyer.
Yes, I
am. What needs to happen for ZANU-PF's agenda to carry on, if they indeed are trying to get a third term? What needs to happen?
So the legal processes are this. Firstly, a constitutional bill has to be gazetted.
Okay.
That constitutional bill must lie in state for 90 days.
Okay.
With other bills, just 14 days before you have a first reading in Parliament. When that bill has been gazetted for 90 days, after 90 days, it can then be tabled in Parliament for its first reading. When it's tabled in Parliament for its first reading,
can I just ask, why 90 days and not 14?
That's the Constitution. It's such an important bill. The Constitution is so important.
Right.
So I'm meaning the Constitution can be equated to normal legislation.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's why the Constitution specifically says
90 days.
It's part of protecting the Constitution.
Right.
And the idea behind the 90 days is that so that everyone in the country knows what is happening. So there's a mandatory gazetting for 90 days period. After that, it must be tabled in Parliament. After that, the Constitution demands that any law, there must be public consultation, Section 143 of the Constitution. So this bill has to be taken to the countryside for consultation. And of course, as we have seen in any bills where there's public interest, for instance, the death penalty, people will flock. And on this one, I can assure you that people are going to flock.
So public consultation does not necessarily mean referendum.
It's a different stage. I'm coming to that. I'm coming to the referendum. Then, when these consultations have taken place, the relevant committee, perhaps they will form a special committee, or they will use the Justice and Legal Parliamentary Portfolio Committee, who will then report to Parliament. When it reports to Parliament through its chairperson, what is called the second reading debate starts. When the second reading debate starts, the bill will then be referred to committee. The committee is the actual drafting. If it passes, it goes for a second reading. So the MPs will say yes, then goes for a third reading. And the third reading now, 2/3 of members of the National Assembly must approve. Okay. So this whole agenda of buying out members of parliament, of creating characters like Chabangu, is intended now to secure the 2/3 majority that is required. So that's in the National Assembly. It then goes to the Senate, where a similar process starts: first reading, second reading, and then 2/3. 2/3 of the membership of the Senate must vote. Once the bill has been approved by 2/3 of Parliament, that is to say, 2/3 in the National Assembly and 2/3 in the Senate, it must then go to a referendum, because it is a bill altering term limits in the country. The referendum is a simple process, Baba. The referendum simply asks whether you are saying yes or no. Because we are going to. There's a second problem. The Constitution then says, when you change this Constitution and you remove the term limits, it doesn't benefit the incumbent.
It benefits the next.
It benefits the next. But you can change that provision.
Same process.
Yeah, we call it the Abdoulaye Wade provision. Because President Abdoulaye Wade amended the Constitution for a third time, and Senegalese said it can't benefit you, and he lost at that stage. And that's why President Sall came in, and as fate as as you know, President Macky Sall also tried to change the Constitution to benefit him. Yet he came through a process of rejecting a third term agenda. That's why you can't trust people. But anyway, to come back to the legal process, another referendum is required now to change the constitutional provision that says you can't benefit. That's when we will see Trababala's true colors, because all along you'll be saying, I don't want Vandovaruda. Now when he says, now the Akuda, the constitution has to go to a referendum for the second time. Baba, Pakaipa.
Well. I think the real problem here is, as Tendai BT readily acknowledges, the process itself is flawed. Zimbabwe can no longer have any confidence in the parliament, in the members of parliament that emerged out of the last 2023 elections. As Tendai BT readily acknowledges, ZANU-PF has already bought those MPs, corrupted them. And it comes back to what happened with those people who emerged out of the 2023 elections truly representing the people, or the process was flawed. And the answer is, of course, it was flawed. SADC election observers, AU election observers, condemned that process as being flawed and illegal. So we now have a situation where we have got an illegitimate president, an illegitimate government trying to increase their stay in office by coming up with an amendment to the Constitution, which they've got all the leeway to rig. This is becoming a circus, Ben.
Good day to you. I must say, it is sad that on one hand, Tendai BT is actually stating that this whole process will just breeze past or sail through, Parliament and the Senate with relative ease. I don't think there's going to be anything to debate about, and people should then wait for a referendum. That is where we are going to act. And looking back from experience, our election process is not free, fair, and credible. There are chances and high chances ZANU-PF will rig that too. And he's not said anything about that. He's not warned about that. So we are being told to act on the last minute. And while doing that, you're not being told that there is a high chance of rigged election or rigged referendum process. I think, somebody that has been beaten on so many times, somebody that has spoken after an election so many times that, there were anomalies within the process, should keep quiet about that and just say, "Tonobatira ukoko referendum." Uh-uh. I don't think that is right. And I don't think it is worth the wait to say, let's wait until the last minute when there are risks involved.
The thing here is we already know that ZANU-PF has been rigging elections. This is a well-established fact. The whole purpose of the GNU of 2008 to 2013 was to give Zimbabwe the opportunity to implement the democratic reforms which would have stopped ZANU-PF cheating and using wanton violence to win elections. That was the primary purpose of that GNU. MDC, including Tendai Biti himself, leaders, failed to implement even one token reform. In 5 years of the GNU. And at the end of it, SADC leaders told them, do not go into these elections without implementing at least electoral reforms. Tendai Biti and company ignored the warning, and they've been participating in these flawed elections ever since. After the 2013 elections, MDCT, led by Morgan Tsvangirai, came up with a resolution at their 2014 Congress that no reforms, no election. That was quickly abandoned out of greed. The people of Zimbabwe must realize here that we are dealing with an opposition that has got its own agenda. But let's go back to the issue of the referendum. The issue of the referendum, in this particular case, changing such a crucial component of the Constitution, must be a process that is squeaky clean. In other words, the result should never be in any doubt that this is the democratic wishes of the people of Zimbabwe. How can we be sure of that when we know the process is flawed? When we know ZANU-PF is already corrupting the whole process? I think this is something that should never be allowed to take place. The explanation that Tendai Biti are giving are totally meaningless. Saying, oh, we'll live in the mountains just to make sure there is an overwhelming no vote. We know that ZANU-PF has got ways of bribing opposition leaders, threatening the electorate to get the result that it wants. If we participate, we will have given the process legitimacy. And we are already participating here. Why are we keeping on participating in a process that we already know is flawed? SADC's report made it abundantly clear that the process in Zimbabwe of the elections 2023 was flawed. What else do we want to be told? To wake up to the reality that we need to clean up our process. My main bone of contention here is that the process is not squeaky clean, and therefore will never, ever be the democratic wishes of the people of Zimbabwe. Why can't we get that in order before we participate?
I've always talked about the recommendations given by, the observer mission. You know, they've given us, recommendations, what we need to change in our process to make it free, fair, and credible. Nothing has been said about that. Nothing has been done about that. So we still have a flawed process in place. Now, with the referendum, there will be no observer, which would make it easier to manipulate, the result or the poll. Easier, way, way easier. If they can do it when, observers are there, guests are there, what if, when they are not there, it will be easier. They can do and get away with it. And who will stop it? The one thing the Zimbabweans need to get here is, in Shona, they say, "Yatsika msheshe yangu." The moment you're seen on that polling station, that is what ZANU PF needs. It doesn't need you to vote yes or no. That day has been decided already. But they need to show the world that people of Zimbabwe came through a process, a democratic process, and they have spoken. What you have spoken, we will never know. You need to get that right. So for the likes of Tendai now to stay, we are going to catch them on the referendum. My guy, how many times have you come out saying ZANU PF blatantly rigged elections? What is to stop them from rigging this referendum? What is there? What measure is there? I think this is another way just to push the people of Zimbabwe into going into a meaningless process and acting as if, they are supporting us. But in between the lines, if you read in between the lines, you can see that this is a ZANU PF, deed, that is being pushed.
Well, I've got on the screen there a recent posting by David Coulthard. While he is willing to say, oh, he doesn't support ZANU-PF's policies, nonetheless, he's praising ZANU-PF government for this so-called glass block dam project that Mnangagwa has authorized, and has given his endorsement of this hashtag Vision 2030. The whole point of this referendum is that Mnangagwa should be allowed to stay in power to deliver his Vision 2030. So we have got here a situation where Tendai Biti is claiming that he will be campaigning for a no vote. And yet some of his own senior opposition leaders are campaigning for Mnangagwa to stay until 2030. I come back to the original statement I made. Elections should be free, fair, and credible. No reform, no election was a very sound position. But this get even greater emphasis when we are talking of a referendum, because the referendum is seeking to change things with even greater consequences than a mere election. In an election, you vote. If you are cheated, you've got a chance 5 years down the line to correct that. In this referendum, for instance, ZANU-PF is seeking to take the power of the people, to have regular elections every 5 years, so that the party now can postpone elections. So people will not have the chance to put things right. Here we have got a situation where ZANU-PF rigged the 2023 elections, and therefore then they are illegitimate. Mnangagwa himself is illegitimate. And yet now he's seeking the power to extend his mandate. And if he gets his wish, this is going to extend his mandate for members of parliament beyond the 5 years, and for himself beyond the 2 fixed terms. The referendum is so important that we cannot afford to have a referendum in which the result can ever be doubted on the basis of, was that a free, fair, and credible process? The process must be beyond doubt that it is the democratic wish of the people of Zimbabwe. This process is not free, fair, and credible. We already know that ZANU-PF has failed to hold a free, fair, and credible electoral process. So why are we kidding ourselves and pretending that this one is going to be any different? The assurances that we get from people like Tendai Biti is not even worth a spit. People must reject this whole process. People must refuse to participate in this flawed process. Because if you do participate, you must accept the result. I totally agree with what Ben was saying at the beginning there, that yatsika mcheche yamwa. That is the principle that is being used here. You have been warned, if you participate in the flawed process, then you are giving the process legitimacy. To turn around and say, oh, the election, the process was flawed, when you have participated, it's too late. You can reject the process and stop participating in it now. I think it's high time people of Zimbabwe open their eyes. How many times have you been conned by the opposition to participate in a flawed process which they have assured the nation, oh, we are going to win it, only to lose it, and they will turn around and say, oh, ZANU-PF rigged the elections, and they never even apologized for having conned the people. Right now, one of the biggest problems we have in the country is that Nelson Chamisa does not want to acknowledge that he lied to the people about his plugging all the vote rigging loopholes. He doesn't even have the decency to acknowledge that he lied. And unfortunately, some of his die-hard supporters want to pretend that he didn't lie. He lied. He is a liar. He is corrupt and incompetent. And the same opposition is the one that participated and gave this ZANU-PF regime legitimacy. We are in this mess because Chamisa and company participated in a flawed process to give it legitimacy. For heaven's sake, we must not participate in a flawed process, a referendum process, to give the process legitimacy. And at the end of the day, lose the very right of the people to have a meaningful say in the governance of the country, the very essence of good governance. Thank you very much. Ben, you can give your closing remarks.
In closing, I would want to say, if there was any doubt that this opposition is ZANU-PF, I think it should be wiped clear. It is, it is as clear as daylight. If you find a person in support of hashtag Vision 2030, and we all know that they want to increase, to extend ED's, term on the basis of economic development, the Vision 2030, and he is already in support of that. Surely, this will just tell you they are together. They've always been in bed together. They pretend that they are with us. Let us do this. Let us do that. Let us do this. And in the night, they are where their masters are. We need to wake up. We are the pawns in this whole fiasco. And unless we see and start to open our eyes to that fact, we're always going to be bulldozed. Zimbabweans will always be bulldozed. You will never have a meaningful say in the country. Forget and smile. This opposition is ZANU-PF in all but name. Thank you.
So I'll reiterate my position here. People of Zimbabwe should never be fooled into believing they could win this referendum. ZANU-PF will see to it that they get the result they want. The only way you can stop this madness is to stop participating in it. SADC has already said Zimbabwe has failed to hold free, fair, and credible elections. In other words, we cannot trust this ZANU-PF to hold free, fair, and credible referendum. The result of a referendum of this magnitude should never, ever be beyond any doubt as to its legality. It must be the democratic wish of the people of Zimbabwe. And the only way you can guarantee that is that the process must be seen to be free, fair, and credible. This process is not. We should not participate in it. Thank you very much, those of you who were able to join us, and have a good evening.